I was reading through the final report on Air Transat Flight 236 this morning.
Oh, it's that one.
Yeah, and the number that just keeps sticking in my head isn't the number of passengers or, the altitude.
Right.
It's 19 minutes.
That is a very long time in the air.
Exactly. That is how long a wide-body Airbus A330 was essentially a 200-ton glider. Just no engines, no thrust, just gravity and aerodynamics.
It's a staggering number. I mean, in aviation, seconds usually define a crisis.
Yeah, definitely.
So to be in a state of dead stick flight, meaning zero power, for nearly 20 minutes and cover almost 100 miles.
It's insane.
It is statistically absurd. It's the kind of thing that if you put it in a movie script, the producers would just say, tone it down. Nobody's going to believe that.
Right. And usually when we talk about these miracle flights, we tend to focus on the landing.
Sure, like Sully and the Hudson.
Exactly. Everyone remembers Sully. But with Flight 236, the landing is almost secondary to the sheer impossibility of the glide itself. So for the listener, you might be nervous about flying, or you might just love a good survival story. But we are deep diving today into what actually happened over the Atlantic on August 24th, 2001.
And we really need to unpack how a catastrophic failure turned into one of the greatest feats of airmanship in history.
Our mission today is to get past those headlines of the miracle flight and really look at the mechanics. Because the source material we have, the excerpts from the 2001 emergency reports, it's just a masterclass in how a modern jet can fail.
And how raw manual skill is sometimes the only thing that can save it.
A passenger jet becoming a glider. I still can't wrap my head around it.
It really is the ultimate case study in the duality of human performance. You have massive human error on one side and incredible human skill on the other.
Yeah.
It's a story that is terrifyingly relevant because it highlights this massive gap in how we perceive safety.
Because we trust the technology, right?
We trust it implicitly. But in this case, the technology didn't just fail. It was actively fighting the pilots for a good portion of the flight.
Okay, so let's strip this down. We've got an Airbus A330 carrying 306 people from Toronto to Lisbon. It's night. They are cruising at 33,000 feet over the mid-Atlantic. The sources say the weather was fine, everything looked totally normal. And then the fuel runs out.
Just runs out.
But modern jets don't just run out of gas like my old Honda Civic. You have redundant systems, sensors, calculations. How does a plane this sophisticated end up completely dry in the middle of the ocean?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and the answer is frustratingly low-tech.
What do you mean?
It wasn't a computer glitch. It wasn't a sensor failure initially. It actually started in the maintenance hangar days before the flight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The source material details an engine change. They were swapping out one of the Rolls-Royce Trent engines.
Okay, so just standard maintenance.
It should have been. But here is where the Swiss cheese model of disaster kicks in. The maintenance crew was installing a newer version of the engine onto an older configuration of the wing strut.
Okay.
So there was a slight difference in the layout of the hydraulic pumps and the fuel lines.
Wait, a difference in layout, like the parts literally didn't fit together.
Well, they fit, but the clearance was wrong. The report indicates that they used mismatched engine parts. Because of a missing part, specifically a hydraulic pump shim, which is basically just a fancy spacer.
A spacer, right.
Yeah, there wasn't enough separation between the hydraulic line and the fuel line. They were just too close. The source specifically calls out these technical shortcuts. Cutting corners on the ground leads to absolute disaster in the air.
So you have a hydraulic line, which is vibrating like crazy under high pressure, sitting right next to a fuel line.
Exactly. And for days, as that plane flew on various routes, that hydraulic line was acting like a saw, just chafing away at the fuel pipe, rubbing back and forth thousands of times a minute, until on Flight 236, specifically 4 hours into the flight, the fuel line finally gave up. It fractured, causing a massive fuel leak.
But the pilots didn't know that, right? I mean, looking at the cockpit transcripts and the source, they didn't get a flashing red light that said giant hole in pipe.
No, and that's the truly insidious part of this human failure. Airbus designed the system to detect engine failures and fires, but at the time, there wasn't a specific sensor for a fuel leak of this nature in that specific location.
So what do they see?
The first indication they got was actually strange oil readings, and then a fuel imbalance. The right tank was getting low a lot faster than the left.
Okay, so this is where I get really critical of the timeline. The report says the pilot saw the imbalance and they opened the cross-feed valve.
Right.
For those listening who aren't pilots, that basically connects the two fuel tanks so they level out, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's standard procedure if you have a simple imbalance. Maybe One engine burns a bit faster, or the wind is pushing you weirdly, so you balance the tanks. But in this case, by opening that valve, they unwittingly pumped the fuel from the good tank into the bad tank.
Or just vented out over the ocean.
Exactly. It immediately sprayed out into the atmosphere, leading to total fuel exhaustion.
They were literally feeding the leak.
They were feeding the leak, and this is a huge point of contention in the investigation. The pilots were following a checklist that assumed the leak wasn't possible, or that it was just a computer error showing the imbalance.
They trusted the system logic over the possibility of a catastrophic plumbing failure.
Precisely. They pumped their reserve fuel right overboard.
That is just a nightmare. You're trying to fix a problem, following the rules, and you're actually accelerating your own doom. So eventually, the engines quit. Both of them.
First, the right engine flamed out. That's when the reality really hit them. They declared a distinct emergency mayday, 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 and diverted toward the Azores. But about 13 minutes later, the left engine, the one they had been feeding the good fuel to, starved out too.
And this is where the popular narrative kind of gets it wrong. We always hear about the silence of the engines, silence over the Atlantic. But you and I know that a jet doing 300 knots is not silent.
Far from it. It's loud. The wind noise against the fuselage at that speed is deafening. But there's another sound that kicks in immediately, and it's a sound very few passengers ever want to hear. The RAT.
The ram air turbine.
Yes. The moment both engines died, the main generators went offline. The plane went dark.
Total power loss.
Instrument panels, cabin lights, everything. Automatically, this little propeller drops out of the belly of the plane into the airstream. It spins up like a windmill to generate just enough electricity to power the flight controls and the most basic instruments.
It's basically like a survival instinct for the plane.
It is, but it sounds like a lawnmower roaring beneath the floorboards. So you have the wind screaming, this turbine growling, the lights are flickering or out, and the air conditioning stops. So it suddenly gets very quiet in terms of white noise, but very loud in terms of aerodynamics. And the cockpit, that's where the real horror is. Because of the lack of functional instruments.
They're flying blind.
Not totally blind, but no engines means loss of primary power. They lost the fancy screens, they were down to the standby instruments, tiny analog dials that tell you your speed, altitude, and heading.
So no GPS map.
No GPS map, no fuel predictions, no flight management computer to tell you can make it. They had to do the math in their heads.
Let's talk about that math, because this is the true deep dive part of the story. Put yourself in that cockpit for a second. You're at 33,000 feet. You weigh 150 tons. You have no thrust. You are just falling.
It's intense pressure.
How do you figure out if you can reach an island that is literally a speck in the ocean? You have 306 souls on board, and your plane is essentially a 100-ton stone.
It's all about the glide ratio. The A330 is actually a surprisingly aerodynamic bird. Its wings are huge. It has a glide ratio of roughly 15-to-1 or 20-to-1, depending on the weight and drag.
Meaning what exactly?
That means for every mile you drop in altitude, you can travel 15 to 20 miles forward.
Okay, so you have some distance. That's the core miracle here, the powerless glide.
Yes.
And we really need to focus on this number. 100 miles. That's not just coasting to a stop. That is covering a massive distance without propulsion.
It is completely unprecedented in aviation history.
But they had to hit a specific target. A military base in the Azores. It's not like landing on a Kansas prairie where you have miles of flat fields to work with. The Azores are volcanic islands. It's cliffs and ocean.
Right. And the pilots, facing extraordinary challenges, had to solve a continuously changing equation. If they flew too fast, they'd burn altitude too quickly.
And if they flew too slow,
they'd stall and fall out of the sky. They had one shot to hit a tiny island in a massive ocean without engines to correct their speed or altitude. They had to maintain a precise speed to maximize distance while navigating to a point they couldn't even see yet.
And they had to do this while the cabin pressure was slowly dropping, right? Because the engines usually provide the pressurization.
Exactly. So they initiated a rapid descent initially to get down to breathable air, but they had to arrest that descent to glide to the island. It's a terrifying paradox. You need to go down to breathe, but you need to stay up to reach land.
Unbelievable. Let's skip forward to the approach. The final moments of the flight, they actually spot the airbase.
Right.
They've navigated 100 miles without engines. That alone is incredible.
Yeah.
But now they have the exact opposite problem. They are lining up for the military base, but they're too high.
This is the moment where the skill level goes from competent to legendary. They arrived at Lodge's air base, but they had too much energy. They were too high and too fast. In a normal plane with engines, you'd just do a go-around. You'd throttle up, circle back, and try again.
But they have one shot. No engines. You can't go around. Remind the listener of the handicap here. They have no functional instrument, so they are flying entirely by feel and sight.
Zero thrust. If they missed the runway, they were going into the Atlantic or into the side of a cliff. So the captain had to lose altitude drastically without gaining speed. Now, usually you'd use spoilers or air brakes, those patterns that pop up on the wing.
Sure.
But because the engines were out, the hydraulic pressure was severely limited. The spoilers were not fully effective.
So the plane basically wants to keep flying, but he desperately needs it to drop.
So he performed a maneuver called a forward slip, or a side slip.
Now, this is something you learned in a tiny little Cessna, right? I didn't think you could even do that in a massive passenger jet.
You generally are supposed to. It involves crossing the controls. You kick the rudder pedal all the way to one side, say left, and you turn the ailerons, the wheel, all the way to the right. The plane basically flies sideways through the air. You are presenting the entire side of the fuselage to the wind.
You're turning the whole plane into a giant air brake.
Precisely. And it feels awful inside the cabin. You are being pushed sideways against your seatbelt. The wind noise increases. The plane is shuddering, but the drag is immense. Wow.
It kills your lift and drops you out of the sky like a stone, but, and this is key, without increasing your forward speed.
That is just brilliant. He's wrestling a wide-bodied jet like it's a crop duster.
It's pure, raw airmanship. No computer would ever do that. If the autopilot had been in charge, assuming it could function, it would have likely flown a stable approach, realized it was too high, and just drifted past the runway into the sea. He had to physically force the plane onto the ground.
So he sideslips it down, lines it up with the runway at Azores. They are coming in hot, though.
Very hot. Normal landing speed is maybe 140 knots. They were crossing the threshold at roughly 200 knots. That is fast.
And again, no engines means no reverse thrust to slow them down.
No reverse thrust. And worse, no anti-skid.
Explain that for us. That's like the ABS in your car, right?
Exactly. Anti-skid prevents the wheels from locking up when you stomp on the brakes. But that system needs significant electrical and hydraulic power. They were running on the RAT, they had emergency braking pressure, but absolutely no anti-skid protection.
So when they hit the runway, they hit hard. The captain slammed the plane down to make sure it stuck. He applied full brakes, and without anti-skid, the wheels immediately locked up.
Which means the tires aren't rolling, they're dragging.
They are grinding. The friction is incredible. The tires blew out almost instantly. The main gear wheels were literally grinding down to the metal hubs on the tarmac. Sparks were flying, smoke was everywhere. The vibration in the cabin must have been like being inside a blender.
But they stopped.
They used almost the entire length of the runway, but they stopped. A miraculous emergency landing.
306 people. Successfully saving all 306 people on board.
It really highlights the rarity of this outcome. Usually, total power loss over the ocean ends tragically. All survived. Some minor injuries during the evacuation because they had to use the slides, and the gear was hot, so there was fire risk, but nobody died.
The source uses the word miracle a lot to describe this. Do you think it was luck, or was it skill?
I struggle with the word miracle. It almost disrespects the pilots. It wasn't magic that brought that plane down. It was physics and skill. It was energy management. It was a side slip. These are highly technical skills.
So it was a miracle created by competence.
Competence under extreme pressure.
Synthesizing this, you really have to connect the dots between the two halves of the story the source provides. On one side, you have significant mechanical and human failures. The maintenance, the shortcuts, the mismatched parts.
And on the other side, extraordinary piloting and skill. It really is an irony. Humanity almost destroyed the plane with negligence, and humanity saved it with instinct.
It stands as a historic example of overcoming the odds, a true testament to pilot training and composure under pressure.
Aviation is safer today because Flight 236 happened and ended safely. The industry learned a huge lesson about mixed configuration fleets and changed the checklist for fuel imbalances.
To quickly recap this incredible journey for the listener, it started with a maintenance shortcut that led to a fuel leak, which resulted in a 100-mile silent glide, ending in a safe landing for 306 people.
It's unforgettable.
It is. And as we wrap up, it leaves me with this final provocative thought derived from the narrative. We often fear technology failing us, the engines, the fuel lines breaking. But in this case, technology failed because of human error, and we were saved only because human instinct took over where the machines left off.
That's a profound point.
It really begs the question. In our increasingly automated world, are we maintaining the raw manual skills necessary to save ourselves when the shortcuts finally catch up with us?
Something to think about the next time you trust the autopilot in your own life.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.